guess we can say we'll make a start now and go for every sort of person in the audience. Okay. So, yeah. I guess I'd like to start by introducing our speakers. So this is Eisen Lazard. He is, I think we described him as a political scientist and activist. That was,
I think I have never once described myself as a political scientist, but go on. Yeah, I'll just say political science was my first university degree, and there still is really a sense in which I love political science. I love what the field is and what it ought to be. And not a lot of people can say that about the field they studied in university. I used to be married to an anthropologist from Cambridge. And I think she could say she hates anthropology and hates both, not just the people in the field, but what the discipline is, what the subject is. But I do have a genuine love for political science. It's not just the area I got my bachelor's degree in. And it is true that one of the big differences between myself and the other vegan activists is that foundation I have in political science and my sort of commitment to political science. Go on, yeah. So it totally makes sense to you to bring it up that way, but I don't really do. I mean, in terms of the job a political scientist does, it's sitting and looking at polls. You know? Go on, yeah.
Okay. So yeah, it's not
your. What percentage of vegans are voting for Donald Trump? It's that kind of. But still to this day, it's I've had younger people ask me if they should study political science at university, and it leads to a very long and difficult conversation because it is most likely the university you are at, the Department of Political Science, is complete horseshit in plain English. But potentially it can be this tremendously meaningful thing in your life. So you saw also the same video I did. We both saw this video of Cosmic Skeptic interviewing Peter Hitchens. So to give you a moment of that really illustrates the importance of political science in daily life for normal people. At one point, Cosmic Skeptic asks him, well, how do we know in Portugal whether the drug problem is getting better or worse, whether there are more drug addicts?
Yeah.
And Peter Hitchens says, completely self-confidently, oh, I don't know. I think it's... He just said, I don't know if you remember that, but he repeatedly dismisses the possibility this is something you could really know and establish as a fact. Well, that's exactly what political science gives you. Political science means you really understand how do we know whether, how bad the drug problem is, whether it's gotten better or worse over the last 10, 20 years, those questions. So yeah, now in the same way, so this is now the year 2023 when we're doing this interview, you are really not old enough to remember the glory days of the vegan movement. I don't mean to insult you, but 2016 was a long time ago now. But the decline, the quantitative decline. Go on, yeah. But we've just lived through a period of the decline of the vegan movement. When I was doing interviews like this 5 years ago, everyone had the perception that the vegan movement was going up and up, that it was getting larger and larger. So you said that's something very different from this, and that's ultimately a kind of political science, social science observation of problem. Go on.
Yeah. So I guess there are a few different ways we could take that. I mean, sort of one of the questions that I wanted to ask in this interview was, like, basically, with that perspective, like, how do we work out what we should be doing in terms of vegan activism, right? Like, we see people like Just Stop Oil and whatever, like, I don't know if you saw this, but Alex O'Connor also interviewed somebody from Just Stop Oil.
Right.
Recently, he was saying, well, I can tell you all these sources we have about non-violence and disobedience, and basically it's the only way anything can ever be achieved.
Right.
Right.
And for you as a math major, this is not too convincing. Sorry, but those arguments also come down to numbers hilariously. Go on, yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I guess.
Yeah. So I want to respond right on that. That is. I mean, certainly for Cambridge, England, that's probably the biggest question you guys are struggling with: the direct and indirect legacy of Extinction Rebellion. So for those who don't know, the group he just mentioned just stopped oil. The former leader of Extinction Rebellion is the current leader of Just Stop Oil. So this is Roger Hallam. So Roger Hallam on paper is no longer the leader of Extinction Rebellion. Now, it is very significant. Sorry, when you're judging these things, just to answer your stated question. So, what do we do next? What's the next step as activists or as revolutionaries or otherwise? Extinction Rebellion was founded with a methodology, and the methodology was, in one word, disruption. Yeah. So we could now expand on what the word disruption means, but it does mean things like standing on top of the roof of a train and preventing the train from leaving, and then trying to get on the news, trying to appear on the nightly news, standing on top of the train, jumping up and down, holding a placard or wearing a T-shirt or reading a slogan. They've also done this, just once to my knowledge, with an airplane. One of their followers glued himself to the top of an airplane, glued his hands onto the airplane, and thus prevented the airplane and caused the delay. So this is disruption. So it is tremendously significant that today Extinction Rebellion has given up on that methodology. They have officially resigned their commitment. They have ended. They've now. Well, that was all they had. Now that they have admitted that disruption doesn't work, or they're not going to do it anymore, however you want to gloss that commitment, now Extinction Rebellion is just a bank account. I do not know how many millions of dollars they have. It may be public information. Maybe you can find that out in the United Kingdom. I've found that for quite a number of organizations, including Earthling Ed's organization. It's interesting how much financial data you can get on that. But there is a bank account, and I would assume it's millions of pounds sterling. A huge amount of money was given to the organization, and a very small number of people, possibly 3 people, have the signing right and sit on top of that bank account and decide who's going to get the money and who doesn't. This is the grim reality of what Extinction Rebellion is. So before, they were a solution in search of a problem. Now they don't even have the solution. Now they don't even have a methodology. And again, significantly, they have removed Roger Hallam as leader, and he is instead the leader of Just Stop Oil. Again, so Just Stop Oil, what do they represent? What are they trying to achieve? And how are they trying to achieve it? It's covered just in the name of the organization, and then also this one-word methodology of disruption. So there's a lot of talk in the vegan movement about being on the right side of history. I am here to tell you that I am on the right side of history. And that within just the last 20 years, 30 years, you can see all the people who have signed up for Extinction Rebellion's ideology and methodology, all the people who have signed up for Just Stop Oil's ideology and methodology, they have been on the wrong side of history. This is a methodology that has failed again and again and again. And I can say it's failing now. It just has failed within the last year even, with Extinction Rebellion giving up on that and so on. So, the predictability of that. Now, just mention, England is a country with no written constitution. And what happens to you in court when you break the law comes down totally to how much sympathy the judge has for you. I'm from a British colony. I live in Canada. Our legal system is very similar to yours, but it is different in some ways. The same methods that are being used by Extinction Rebellion and Just Stop Oil, if you were Muslim, you would be in the clink. You would be doing hard time in jail for doing exactly the same methods. There's absolutely no way that a Muslim person who is protesting because they want Sharia law, who glues themselves to an airplane, who stops flights at an airport, would get away without doing hard time in prison. Now, you might be a devout Catholic who's part of an anti-abortion group. If you use the same tactics in England, you can tell me. I think that's about half as severe. I think the judges would be half as sympathetic to Catholics as to Muslims. This is, from my perspective, this is a profoundly immoral aspect of the law in England, and you have to ask yourself these questions. Do you want to get away with doing something immoral someone else wouldn't get away with? But that's England. Because I can't say to you that Roger Hallam himself has not done any serious jail time. He's had some very minor punishments and consequences. So within the United Kingdom, you probably can get away with this kind of terrorism light to some extent. But in the United States and in most of the world, one of the things I say, to young people at Cambridge, but I say this to old people too, it's not really that different. I really do warn them of the extent to which you are going to ruin your life if you get involved with that ideology, that set of tactics, that set of methods. And my methodology, my $1 book, I think it's €1 approximately. My methodology, among its other redeeming qualities, will not ruin your life. So, like you as an individual, you have to live, you have to grow old, and so on. So that's the crossroads we're at. And as I say, I'm not going to be humble about it. I absolutely think I'm on the right side of history, and they're on the wrong side of history. Now, I just mentioned again, if you are young, it's hard to visualize this. But this cycle has been going on again and again since the late 1970s. It is interesting that it began in the 1970s and not the 1870s or the 1770s. You guys have a hilarious example in England of he wasn't even vegan. He was kind of a vegan activist who wasn't vegan. This guy who broke into a theme park and tried to abduct a dolphin and spends the rest of his life in prison. He was trying to liberate the dolphin out of a sea park. There's an example, actually. This is the brother of one of the sexy actresses on the TV show Baywatch, and this is the only reason this was in the newspaper. He used a bomb and burned down a slaughterhouse, and it was a slaughterhouse especially for horses, I think for race horses and what have you, rather than a cow slaughterhouse. He's in and out of prison for the rest of his life. People, and as you say, this has been going for decades and decades. In England, you guys are the home of the ALF, the Animal Liberation Front. It's a shameful legacy. I don't celebrate the ALF. I don't tell young people today to ruin their lives the way people did, again, since the 1970s. Sorry, it is slightly different. The United States of America, it's more the legacy of anarcho-capitalism, people like the Unabomber. Whereas in England, it's more groups like the ALF, groups that are more directly tied to veganism, I might add, as opposed to ecology more broadly speaking. So the stakes are very high. And, one of my catchphrases, say again and again, is the excuses are harder to quit than the thing itself. If you now, so again, I assume some young people will see this video. By the way, I'm totally happy to have 50-year-old, 60-year-old viewers. Nothing against older viewers watching it. But if as a young person you start making these excuses for so-called nonviolent activism that's actually quite violent, where that takes you in life. What is going to become of you? What becomes believable? What becomes acceptable now? What you start to justify? What do you start to make excuses for? It's terrible where that leads within the next 10, 20 years. What's going to be left of you 10, 20 years from now? And sadly, I have gray hairs in my beard. Part of the role for older people like myself is to try to pass on that message. Say, look, this may seem new to you, but we've seen it before. We've been through this before. And, I know what's going to become of you as an individual, and I know what's going to become of your movement, whether it's on the scale of a few dozen people or hundreds of people or thousands of people, if you get on that road. That's very much the road that, apropos your question, Just Stop Oil involves, and Extinction Rebellion and so on.
Yeah, I think in terms of a sort of positive contrast to that, I guess I think we were discussing, we have a student movement in Cambridge, plant-based Cambridge, which is basically trying to use the systems of democracy, bureaucracy, whatever in the university to basically get switches to plant-based catering,
right,
and environmentally focused group. I think we have the positive contrast here because it's actually not imposing things on anyone. It's actually I guess it's sort of imposing things on people, but in terms of the actual way in which this is done, it's through democratic means, through the legitimate means of the institution. Right? I guess do you have any? I don't know if you have any thoughts on this movement specifically, but
the movement for vegan meals on campus, do you mean, or just not sure what you're asking?
Well, it's plant-based universities is the natural movement, but perhaps a bit more broadly, what sort of tactics should we be using to actually like get through the agenda, right? If we're like, if disruption, veganism, whatever is obviously being off the table, what are the means that we can use that will actually have some effect or might actually have some effect?
Well, I just remind you, we are a hated minority as vegans. So, there are many contexts in which I talk about democracy. This is a special context in which you're talking about what can you do and what should you do within a democracy as a despised minority. What has been accomplished in the last 20 years, maybe I should even say 30 years actually, is that vegans went from being unknown to being the butt of jokes on sitcoms. Now, that happened for homosexuals. I would say the end of that was the 1970s. There was a TV sitcom called Soap in the United States. That's the whole name. It's just SOAP, just the name Soap. And that was the first appearance of an openly gay character on a sitcom or in any kind of televised comedy. So prior to that, there was some subtle innuendo, and even Shakespeare has cross-dressing characters and so on. But that was the first really direct portrayal of a gay protagonist. And it was shocking to people. And a lot of it was vulgar humor and comedy and was making fun of gay people. But nevertheless, the humanity of having a gay protagonist, this was this really important step. Now, I'm not making a cause and effect claim here. It's not like, once you've become the object of derision and humor on a sitcom, the next step is you take over the government. The next step is, legislation or something. It's not a cause and effect relationship. But I would point out, so right now there's a civil war situation in Israel, Palestine, however you want to hyphenate it. Palestinians do not watch sitcoms that have a gay character. Palestinians do not watch sitcoms that have a vegan character, right? Israelis do, right? Veganism, many people claim that as a percentage of the population, vegans are a higher percentage of Israel than anywhere else. This is debatable, but anyway, it's one of the most vegan societies in the world. And we're hated. I mean, again, vegans are hated in these places. They're despised. But nevertheless, I think right away, this gives you a sense of, places like Palestine, places like Saudi Arabia, they are in that sense not living in the same world and not living in the same era as us, because nobody in Saudi Arabia is growing up watching in their own language. They may be watching TV in English, but nobody is growing up with movies and sitcoms and comedies that depict homosexuals, again, as human beings, even if they're being made fun of in a comedy. And nobody is watching sitcoms that depict vegans that way. Now, sorry, just a very brief digression, because I want to say it's not only this kind of self-identified minority that matters this way. I come from a deeply corrupt society. Canada is very much a country of nepotism and bribe-taking and so on. We've never had a comedy, never a movie, never a TV show that depicts corrupt politicians. Now, I can't say that about England. I don't know BBC humor that much, but probably the same is approximately true. I don't know how far you'd have to dig in the annals of Thames television to see something that's not talking about corruption as something that happens in far-off third world countries, but something else. So, and again, I think you can imagine if there were a mainstream TV show, mainstream movie, really looking at corruption and nepotism in politics, that could also be important that way. So sorry, it's just a digression so that I'm not only using veganism and homosexuality this way. Okay, however, here's the problem. A lot of people, and the initial question and how you asked me, a lot of people look at these things as if vegans are now in a position to claim their rights and kind of write legislation and enforce it on other people as if we're the majority, or as if we're some kind of beloved and adored and respected minority, which we're not. You talk about vegan meals at university campuses. How about vegan meals in prison? There's no reason why prisons should serve meat. Even if you hate veganism, like if you're anti-vegan, you should be even more in favor of forcing prisoners to be vegan. Like, if you think eating beef is the most wonderful thing, then deprive the prisoners of it, I talked to one guy who was trying to get rich off of that in the United States. he was involved in the industry of providing vegan meals to government agencies, and that was his big dream. With it, prisons were the biggest. That was the most millions of dollars of all. But he was interested in providing vegan meals to the military and different government agencies. You know what I'm saying? God, have fun staying poor, as I like to say. I don't think it worked out for him. Anyway, but we're not in that position. We're not at all. On the contrary, the position we're in is much more like Muslim protesters or anti-abortion protesters who are regarded as crazy and deranged by the majority of the population. Now, again, I am vegan, and I am not a moderate vegan. I'm really not. I had a conversation with another vegan here in Canada where she said to me, and I'm sure she said this in 100 conversations with 100 people, she said, well, with any political ideology, once you start dealing with the extremists, it's bad. Like, it's only the people in the middle who are reasonable. I just looked at her and I said, I'm not boasting or something. I said to her, like, you must realize that I am an extremist. Like, I'm not, there's absolutely nothing moderate about my position in the vegan movement. However, my extremism is combined with a very real humility, and I say all the time, use sympathy as an analytical tool. I'm aware of how crazy and unreasonable my beliefs are, even from the perspective of my own parents. Some of you may have more sympathetic parents. Think about your grandparents. Think about your aunt and uncle or something. There will probably be people within your family who regard you as crazy. So, the types of organization, the types of change you can work for, whether it's within, a kind of overt public institution like Cambridge. I'm aware Cambridge is not one institution. It's several dozen tiny institutions that pretend to be one institution. The type of change you can work for there, or the type of change you can work for in lobbying government and so on, it must be from the position of a hated and despised minority. We are much less powerful than the Mormon Church. We are much less powerful than the Quaker Church. To get into examples that are smaller than Islam. And now again, you mentioned I have a background in political science, which is absolutely true. As I say, it's deeply meaningful to me. I also have a background in religious studies and cult studies and the politics of religions. That's also very, very useful to me. And a lot of these tactics, a lot of these things, how do you think people in Cambridge would react if you have this kind of majoritarian democratic attempt to bully them and change policy and so on from the Mormons, or from the Muslim minority or what have you? And the Muslim minority has billions of dollars behind it. I mean, the amount of money and power and organization. It's one of the largest religions in the world, and the amount of funding you can get from Saudi Arabia or what have you is tremendous. We don't have that. There is no vegan equivalent to Saudi Arabia backing up what we're doing. There isn't some oil-rich nation of vegans backing up our agenda. So anyway, in some ways, it's a long answer to your question. But if you feel that's not a direct enough answer to your question, by all means say so. But really conceptualizing yourself and making strategic decisions as a despised minority within a democracy, it's a very different thing. Go on.
I was sort of thinking along pretty much those lines. Getting involved with the plant-based Cambridge campaign. I was very surprised that the student union here actually did vote in favour of the policy, even though actually their vote doesn't actually do anything.
Right.
Not yet anyway. But as a displaced minority, I don't know. Would it be?
Well, can I just remind you though? So as young as you are, within your lifetime, the vegan campaign against animal testing at Cambridge has completely died and failed. So I'm forgetting the acronyms, but there's an animal testing laboratory that's a short distance outside of Cambridge. It's not in the city of Cambridge, and it does all these contracts with the different colleges and research facilities in Cambridge. And that went on for decades. And people went to prison. And there were pro-vivisection rallies. Many people don't know the word vivisection, as you mentioned. Vivisection is different from dissection because the animal is alive and being tortured during the experiments. So it's experiments on living animals as opposed to cadavers or corpses. That has completely ended in failure. So I just want to point out, people devoted decades of their life and millions of dollars. I mean, ultimately, there's money involved with all these things. And some people went to prison, and a lot of them weren't even vegan. That's always the funny thing about animal rights activists. A lot of these people are they care so much about animal rights, they still eat meat every day. But that's right there at Cambridge. You can meet some of those people. I remember I met one I used to live in Cambridge. I met one at a grocery store in Cambridge. I met this guy, and he was I'm sorry, I forget all the acronyms, but he was part of that old guard that goes back decades of these, one of them is Stop Huntington Animal Cruelty, SHAC, which everyone lies about what really happened with that, by the way. But so Huntingdon, I think, is the name of the particular laboratory they like to focus on. People's lives were ruined, and that ended in failure. And the one thing you can learn is, guess what? 90% of people at Cambridge hate us. 90% of people in Cambridge think we're crazy. 90% of people in Cambridge think it's completely reasonable to torture an infinite number of animals to death in these laboratory experiments, and they even view it positively as part of the progress of science and education. So don't fucking kid yourself, because the participants of that movement, they were kidding themselves for years. They thought, it's the same with religious people. They think they represent all the virtues and redeeming quality. We represent compassion, kindness. People love their dog. When you explain to them, hey, here you are walking your dog and picking up its poo, feeling its heat go through the plastic bag in your hand every day. You care. Well, guess what? There were other dogs being tortured to death, walking distance away at this lab here in Cambridge. It's the truth, right? There are dogs being tortured to death for these experiments. So therefore, no, there's no therefore. People will walk their dog every day and eat beef and will support lab animals being. So just say I'm partly mentioning this because this is at Cambridge. Even if you don't intend to, it's quite possible you'll meet some people who are fragments of that old anti-vivisection movement in Cambridge, and it's totally ended in failure. Go on, yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure there's some protest probably against that same thing coming up. An advert from Facebook. I mean, on that particular issue, that's like I guess perhaps the difference with that is like we have a really strong other side, right? To that issue, right? Well,
on the other side of the meat issue is McDonald's. McDonald's is pretty strong too. Go on, yeah. Look, it's your interview. Again, even by having this interview, there might be some people in your group who watch this and then have a conversation with everyone. They say, "Yeah, actually, 10 years ago, they were part of that anti-vivisection movement." So, I just say there were lessons to be learned from that, from the failure of that, and how we go ahead here and now. Go on.
Okay, so we've spent some while talking about those issues. Let's move on to something a little bit different, which is, I guess, relating to your experience working in ecology and how that's informed your perspective on the vegan movement. I mean, we have a few different approaches, right? To abolitionist approach. Citizenship approach. People don't tend to talk about that one that much anymore, in my experience. But your viewpoints on this. I'm blanking. Sorry.
Well, no. Look, I'll just say in general, one of the interesting things about political philosophy is that most political philosophies exist to negate some other philosophy. Now, actually, a great contrast to this is math. Math is not like that. A new theory, so just to give an example, a new approach to the speed of light and its significance and what have you. This will be proposed and debated because of how well it can solve some problem, how well it resolves some issue. So I just mentioned how the equations are done to calculate the motion of the planets around the sun. This is still debated because they're imperfect. We can't actually, it's not perfect, our equations. So I no big deal. I'm not worried about it. But once you get down to a certain level of precision, we know those equations aren't quite right. There's something we're not calculating for correctly in the movement of the planets around the sun. Don't worry. The sun's going to rise tomorrow. It's not that inaccurate, but there are inaccuracies. So there's an outside test. There's some measure of whether or not this equation works, whether or not this theory is good, whether or not this philosophy is good. For the most part, in political philosophy, we're proposing new ideas, we're articulating a philosophy in order to negate something else, such as communism, such as fascism. And very often it's important to say, look, to understand what this philosophy is about, why this was going on, you have to understand what it's negating. So again, a boring but important example, the philosophy that the United States of America was founded on. You really can't understand it unless you understand it negatively. You understand what it was opposed to, what it was negating. It's very incoherent if you just regard it as a positive doctrine this way. So look, the emphasis on ecology and what I call the wildlife management approach. Yeah. There are several things this is negating, one of which, and again, you may not encounter this at Cambridge, but you may encounter it too often. you may encounter it heartbreakingly often. I was surrounded in the vegan movement by people who believe in the soul. Not necessarily Christian. You can be Hindu and believe in souls. You can be Jain. You can be influenced by New Age spirituality under various headings. And these people believe that it was an evil act to kill a rat. They believe it's an evil act to kill a cockroach. They believe it's an evil act to kill a bedbug. And obviously they believe it's a tremendously evil act to kill a cow. Now, there's a very blunt, brutal sense in which my model of veganism does not agree with this. So let's say, Canada is kind of a bad example. Let's say you have an island nation like Taiwan. You'll see why I'm just choosing an island. So Taiwan, over 30 million people, as I recall. I say, look, guys, we're going to have a referendum here in Taiwan. We're an island, and we're going to have 0 cows and 0 pigs on the whole island. It's over. Like, we're just not going to do it. I'm not going to make meat illegal. If some people want to eat imported meat, it can be imported from Australia, it can be imported from Japan, but this is going to drastically reduce the amount of meat people are eating, and obviously meat is going to become more expensive and more scarce. But on this island, guys, like ecologically, this is a joke. We cannot have 30 million people and 60 million cows and 120 million pigs. We can't do it. This is a wrap. And let's just say we have a referendum and people vote the right way. Okay, we're going to kill millions of cows, right? In taking this step toward veganism, we are going to kill cows, but we're going to stop breeding new cows. It's going to cease to be a perpetual cycle of producing and torturing and killing cows. Now, again, I realize some people are like, well, come on, isn't this a footnote? Like, so you support killing cows if it's ending the slaughterhouse industry, if it's ending the cattle farming industry. It's not a footnote. It's a profound fissure within the vegan movement. And again, to bring it down to a human scale of one person, people ruin their lives as individuals, and dozens of people and hundreds of people ruin their lives as a movement or as a unit. Only one person ever has kind of interviewed me, has spoken to me at length about how her life was ruined by running one of these stupid sanctuary farms where all she does all day is take care of chickens. So some of the chickens were literally rescued by Wayne Seong's group. He's Direct Action Everywhere. So these are literally chickens that were rescued so that the vegan protesters could hold them up and photograph themselves. What happens to the chicken after that? Well, individual human beings ruin their lives for decades caring for these chickens. That's their whole fucking life. It's horrible. They live on a farm, but it's a farm that doesn't produce meat. It's a farm that just collects donations and keeps these animals in captivity forever. So, that commitment to one animal has one soul and that no animal should be killed, that's part of what I'm negating with the approach via ecology. Now, I just have to point out, the wildlife management approach and the focus on ecology, there are actually many other misconceptions, in my opinion. There are many other bad ideas in veganism that it avoids by approaching it in that way. But, as surreal as it may sound at the beginning, my model of veganism is not about saving the lives of animals. And you should take seriously what the absurdities are when what you're committed to is saving the lives of animals. You may have met these people, you may not have. I know people in England, and their whole life is taking care of rats. They rescue rats, and then they keep the rats in their apartment so the rat can live a full life in captivity. They have literally a rat in a cage, and they think this is veganism. They think this is vegan activism. And they may receive donations for this. They may be famous on YouTube for this. Put up video of yourself caring for these rats, and they'll sit there and say every day, this rat is loving and kind, and it's just like a dog, and it's just like a cat, and you should love a rat. Okay, so these are the absurdities that the one animal, one soul model leads you into, and you have to take it seriously. So yeah, now what is my perspective on rats? So in a word, it's ecological. I think rats should exist in the forest, or in the desert, or in the plains, that they should exist within their ecological niche, and that you draw a line on a map and you say that's the wilderness and this is the city, and then within the city you don't allow rats. Which means, as a vegan, I am committed to killing some number of rats forever and ever. One of the standard examples I like to give is of birds at an airport. People may not know this. Every airport in the world has to kill birds so that it's safe for airplanes to take off and land. So either you believe in killing birds or you believe in abolishing airports as we know them. So, the violence of getting rid of rats, whether it's on a farm or in a city or what have you, it is horrible. It's a tragedy, But my model of veganism, again, on the one hand, it's about the wilderness. It's about, actual wild animal life, not dogs and cats living in captivity. It's not my model. It's not part of my model of veganism at all. Not glorifying pet ownership or playing with animals as your toys, as your playthings. And on the other hand, it is also based on a kind of mature acceptance of the significance of violence against animals in our society that will be perpetual. Now, again, I'm an extremist. I'm not a reducitarian. I have absolutely zero tolerance for wearing leather shoes, for example. I see no reason why wearing leather shoes shouldn't be illegal. We can mercilessly oppress everyone who wants to wear leather shoes. To me, this is not a legitimate human need. However, on the other hand, as I say, clearing out the area around an airport so that you don't have birds going into the engine of an aircraft, this to me is not the same as the vanity of vanities represented by leather shoes. Okay, I don't know if that's too long an answer or too short. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think this sort of reflects a little bit perhaps your approach to ethics generally. It's something that strikes me as something that's different about you than a lot of other people, which is you're happy to say, yes, we're going to do this thing even though it is evil.
Yes.
Because we have to achieve this other thing, and that doesn't make it okay. But
right.
It's still something that we're going to do and that we should.
So I haven't reread this since I wrote it. This is my other bigger book. This one's real short and easy. But yeah, one of the questions I have to ask myself when so there's going to be a second edition that fixes all the typos. So buy this now, so you have the version with the typos in it. I wonder if I'm clear enough in what I say about violence, because seemingly everyone who reads the book says, oh, it's this wonderful, completely nonviolent method of activism and democracy and political science. This is a completely nonviolent political philosophy. And it's like, really? Yeah. I thought I said quite a bit about violence, go on. But no, I mean, this is me as an old man. So, you've mentioned part of my background is in ecology. I was involved in ecological politics before I was vegan. I was vegetarian at the time. Forgive me. But I say my engagement with ecology as politics goes back further. But, I've been involved in all of these other incredibly violent areas of politics: Cambodia, Laos, Thailand, communist China. But, obviously the history of Europe is incredibly violent. And, of course, the extinction of the Cree and Ojibwe, our indigenous people here in Canada. So this is the British Empire. This is your empire, people at Cambridge. Nobody in England gives a fuck. But this is your genocide. You guys committed genocide here, not me. Just being real. You can say I'm responsible for the genocide in the Gaza Strip right now. I'm really not. But if you want to say that, this is your genocide, British Empire here in Canada. Nobody in their right minds can look back at the history of the indigenous people here in North America and say, well, what their problem was? They didn't learn how to take a cardboard sign and wear a bikini and stand on the sidewalk and protest peacefully. It's once we're dealing with real history. Now, again, we could talk about Australia or some other example. Just anyone who takes seriously, I could say the history of the world generally, the role and significance of violence, it's something I do take very seriously, even though it's tragic. Now, again, sorry, a lot of people don't take the idea of tragedy very seriously, but you put it very well, that I'm willing to say this is evil, and we're going to do it anyway. That's tragic. I'm not celebrating it. Yeah. A tragic acceptance that we're going to, don't know if you know this example, Midway Island, an obscure island, they're home to the largest and most beautiful birds in the world. In prehistoric times there were larger birds, but the bird with the largest wingspan in the world, it's the seafaring albatross or something. I forget its name. There's this enormous bird, and that island totally relies on its airport. It has to land, and it's horrifying. I'm not, I don't celebrate this. It's terrible. But yeah, this is so, yeah. a willingness to behold the horror of what human civilization entails, and to kind of take responsibility for that and say, yes, we are going to continue fighting wars. We're going to continue fighting revolutions and other kinds of political violence. And yeah, the violence that underpins the status quo here and now, we have to be just as serious in looking at what kinds of violence we accept. We have to be just as serious in looking at the violence we accept as we are in looking at the violence we reject. Because obviously, as I say, I completely reject the production of beef and the production of leather, for example, which 99% of humanity is resigned to and embraces. We can talk about whatever you want to talk about. You tell me if this is a depressing topic of conversation or not.
Sure. Yeah, we've some good ground here. I was thinking at this point in time, I'd say, are there any questions from the audience? But we're close to the audience. So I don't know, Lucy, if you want to ask guys a question, let's do the chat or whatever. Yeah, I don't know. Right. Yeah, I guess. I guess the other sort of thing I was going to talk about is the. Okay, yeah, that's right. So the other question I was going to ask about is like, so in terms of the environmental and ecological aspects of veganism, I think there are, like, I hear some vegans saying that that they feel like these aren't really the central most important parts of the movement, and that this is just something that you sort of have on the side. I think for you, in terms of the like the ethical side of veganism sort of blends into the environmental or ecological aspects, right? And so I guess I guess my question on that would be like why is veganism so central to whether it's combating climate change,
right,
or other environmental issues,
right?
I guess.
Great question. I think I already understand the question. There are two answers. One answer has to do with people, and then one answer has to do with objective reality, like the atmosphere itself, so on and so forth. So the objective reality side is kind of boring. Why is veganism more important than solar panels? So solar panels, I mean photovoltaic, this particular technology. Okay, it's just because veganism will work. Veganism actually is the solution to the climate change problem, and solar panels are really a footnote. It'll shave a few percentage points off. It's beautiful technology. It's fine. It's whatever. But this is really a sideshow to the ecological problem. Whereas veganism, unto itself, coercive veganism, government coerced radical reductions in meat production and meat consumption, actually is the solution. So that's just an objective reality, and is therefore kind of boring. Here's the more important part. It has to do with the people. So let's say you're living in Saudi Arabia. Let's say you're an atheist. Let's say you hate the culture. Who are you going to work with in Saudi Arabia? Are you going to work with people who are basically Islamo-fascists, to be blunt, people who are Muslim fundamentalists, people whose politics and beliefs and ideology center around Saudi Arabia making war against Yemen, and Saudi Arabia's opposition to Iran, and sectarian differences that exist within Saudi Arabia, and the question of exactly how much they're going to oppress women. You may not know this, but one of the biggest political questions in Saudi Arabia is whether or not women would be allowed to drive a car. this kind of thing. Okay, but they support solar panels. What you have in common is this technology, this technique that, footnote, doesn't even work, won't solve the problem. Are you going to build a movement with people where your common ground, where the distinguishing feature about who they are and what you have in common as two people is solar panels? Like, you both believe in solar panels, you both like solar panels. Maybe you both even have invested money in solar panels, or you manufacture them and distribute them. All right? Now, again, I'm using Saudi Arabia because it's so extreme. Guess what? If you live in Georgia, if you live in Virginia, if you live in Thailand, I could pick all kinds. It may be more subtle, it may be more extreme, right? Sorry, it may be less self-evidently extreme, the contrast. But I have nothing meaningful in common with. I can't build a movement with people even in Toronto, the city I grew up in, where what we have in common is solar panels, right? So as a criterion, as a barrier to entry, as what defines who you are as a person, who the other person is, who we are as a group, that's why veganism is so important. And, even within Saudi Arabia, some people are vegan. Some people have figured it out. I have actually looked into, there is a vegan movement in Palestine, not only in Israel. There are some extraordinary, Palestinians who are at least born Muslim, whether or not they're atheists now, who figure out the importance of veganism. Within Palestine, those would be the people you'd want to work with. There are a lot of Meshuggah Israelis too. Israel would be politically a very difficult context for me to live in and work in, right? But within Israel, some people are vegan. So yeah, that human dimension, that's, I think, the most important pragmatic reason. And, I think it is an interesting hypothetical question to ask. What if there were some technology much more effective than solar panels, much more effective than wind power, much more effective than making a transition to, say, running airplanes with a slightly different fuel? Because I just say these things, they're all rounding errors. You're not even shaving 5% off the ecological problem, as it happens. But if there were some technology like that, I think still veganism would have this tremendous importance, as opposed to the bridge between you and other activists being a weird kind of technocracy of believing in a technique and a technology as an approach to ecology. My horrifying answer.
It's a good point. Yeah, if you're building a movement with somebody, you've got to have some amount of things.
Well, I think Cambridge is a great place for you to see this. By the way, there will at least be at Cambridge. Sorry, I don't know if we can turn off the mic on the other. I don't want to speak. We just don't. Okay, good. Thanks, Daniel. Sorry, we just don't want random noise in the background. But at Cambridge, you will get to meet people who are enthusiasts for nuclear power. I know there will, because those people who study those sciences, you'll have significant numbers of those guys are guys who really believe nuclear energy is a solution to a problem. And you will find many of them are incredibly stupid, incredibly selfish, incredibly emotionally immature, and incredibly immoral people, incredibly evil people. But they support, massively expanding the number of nuclear power plants in Europe or in America or around the whole world, whatever their emphasis is in nuclear power. So again, you can ask yourself, is this the table I want to sit at? Are these my colleagues? Is this my movement? And I say this, I of all people know how despicable my fellow vegans are. But again, whether I'm living in Saudi Arabia or I'm living here in Canada, that has to be, someone who at least has the moral awareness and self-discipline to be vegan themselves, to say, look, I can't even make my own parents vegan, but I can take on this responsibility. This is something I can do and I have to do as a first step. Then maybe after that, we talk, Again, if you want to get involved with solar panel distribution or something, it's not evil. It's okay. There are innumerable other political causes you could get involved with, but why would you do that with someone who's either too stupid, too immoral, or too lacking in self-discipline to even take that first step to veganism as a precondition? And you're going to have to ask yourself this question again and again and again, even within your years at Cambridge.
Well, I think it's been a good conversation.
Okay.
We have.
I'm glad I solved all your problems. It's good.
I mean, we're pretty much at the 1 hour mark now, so we could end reasonably soon. I don't know if, you've only just come in. I don't know if you have any questions related to the little bit that you heard us talking about, or maybe it would be it's better to end there. I don't know. What do you think, Hazel?
That's a wrap. What else could possibly be said about the future of the vegan movement?
Okay. It's been great to have you. Yeah, I wish we'd had a few more people in the audience from our side, but do feel free to put this up on YouTube. If you want to do that, I don't think we actually told the other people in the meeting it was being recorded, but if you just take them out, it's definitely fine as far as I'm concerned. Okay. Well, thanks for being here. And I look forward to hearing what it is you're getting up to next.
Okay, as I always say, the future of the vegan movement is you. And, guys, if you think every vegan doesn't count, I've been in this movement a long time. You told me there are 30 members of your Cambridge Vegan Society. You're allowed to hate my book. You're allowed to disagree with it. But I've got to tell you, this is the single most important publication in the vegan movement in the last 30 years. And I know because I read all the other ones. If you want to read Gary Francione, it's probably number 2. You can read this shit. But, the questions we have to ask ourselves as individuals, the questions we have to deal with as small groups, 30 people, 10 people, whatever, and the questions we have to ask on a mass scale, those questions are not being asked by Earthling Ed. They're not being asked by Joey Carbstrong. They're not being asked by Alex O'Connor or Cosmic Skeptic, right? They're not. And again, you can hate me. You can hate me and you can hate my book. I really don't mind. I'm an object of scorn and derision. But those are the questions we have to ask ourselves. And again, sorry, a long time ago we mentioned it. These questions are not being asked by Extinction Rebellion or Just Stop Oil. So if you want to come up with your own answers, by all means, eclipse me. I would be so eager to become someone else's follower or become someone else's fan. I would be so eager, But I do think the fundamental questions we have to ask now in 2023, a period in which veganism is in decline, and a period in which, if there's one thing Extinction Rebellion is right about, the climate crisis is very real. The crisis of global warming, excessive carbon dioxide production, so on and so forth. I am an alarmist in that respect, too. So, I don't actually think we're playing with a whole lot of time. I don't think we have so many cards in the deck still to be played out. So, guys, thank you if you've listened to this 1 hour interview. And again, I don't know if it'll take you 2 hours to read the book. But, by all means, I have to say this. If you hate my book, if you hate my perspective on the vegan movement, you are still better off putting the time and energy into criticizing this book, into criticizing my perspective, than you are wearing a bikini and standing on the sidewalk holding a placard. This is a better use of your time than chanting slogans, wearing lingerie, or pulling off other crazy stunts and disruptions, whether they land you in prison or not. The fundamental model of vegan activism we've got is bad and broken and wrong. And it's not leading you to a better life as an individual, and it's not leading us to better outcomes as a movement. And even the time you take in criticizing and rejecting my contribution to the movement, like, fine, go ahead, define your own path. You tell me, make your own YouTube video saying I'm wrong about everything. That is really going to be important for you as individuals, for you 30 people, or however many people hear this message. And it's going to be important in a way that, no other form of vegan activism or participation in the movement can be. Okay? That's my pitch.
Okay, well, yeah, thanks very much for